Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Better Call Saul Season 4, Episode 2, Breathe. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Better Call Saul, so I have to start with a spoiler warning for Better Call Saul up to Season 4, Episode 2. If you haven't seen it at this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So, this was a pretty solid episode of Better Call Saul. It was a really good second entry to the season. I think the second episodes of the season actually do tend to be good with this show. I was never bored. I never thought this was dull, even though, of course, it's slow moving, as the show always is. But it was like good slow. It was really intriguing, great acting, great character revelation. So let's just jump right into it. So let's start with Jimmy and his storyline. It's very weird. I don't know what to make of it, really. So I'm interested to hear what you guys say in the comments about this one. Because Jimmy, alright, so he goes on these job interviews. He's ready to go. Like Kim says, oh, you can take some time off. You don't have to go look for a job immediately. But he's like, no, I want to get out there. And to me, I think this is him. He seems to be ignoring Chuck's death and the passing and all that means. And it's kind of like putting it off, which I'll get to a bit more later on, but it seems like he's just wanting to distract himself and wanting to keep himself busy. So he goes to this, and we see him take this job interview at this copy place, and he knows a lot about copy machines because he used to work in the copy hall, and so he makes a good impression on them, on the people he's interviewing, and they say, okay, we'll get back to you in a week. And then you see him, he's about to walk out the store, he turns around and he's like, nah, I could do more. So he goes back in and he does this big pitch about how, copies machines is the heart of any workplace, and if that fails, it fails. And it's like he gave this really heartfelt speech, and he was able to sell anyone. He's like, why wait a week? Because I could be out there selling for you right now. And so he convinces them, he talks them into it, and they're like, yeah, okay, you talked us into it, we'll hire you right now, you can start immediately. And then he's like, are you stupid? What the hell are you doing hiring me without a background? You didn't even check my background. You didn't even look into anything. You're just going to hire me right away. You're dumb. And walks out. I was like, I don't want to work for you. Now, that is weird. That is just such a weird thing. I guess it's meant to show the turmoil that inner turmoil that Jimmy's going through, and that he's sort of split. But I thought that was really bizarre. When I was watching that scene, I was like, what the fuck are you doing, Jimmy? That was so weird. But it seems like he's kind of split between wanting to con people, because he's basically, conning them, convincing them to hire him, even though he doesn't have any sales experience, and he's really good at doing it, and in fact talked him into it. And it seems like he's torn between the con side and the feeling guilty about it for doing the right thing side, because he realized that doing the right thing is not he is conning them, and he's he wants to do the right thing and tell them, hey, you guys are being stupid. I think also there's an element could be in that he doesn't want to work for people who are that dumb. I mean, in one case that means he could rob them blind, but I suppose he doesn't want to go that route. He doesn't want to manipulate people. He wants to work for a team that he can trust, that he feels confident in. He doesn't feel confident in these idiots for hiring him just because he made a great speech. So it's weird. I think it shows how conflicted Jimmy is. I was a bit confused about this myself, so as I said, I'll be curious to see what if anyone in the comments has any thoughts on what was going on with Jimmy in this scene. I thought it was a bit weird. Amazingly acted, though, of course. So then we get the Kim side of thing, because it's interesting. We see Kim go to this, inheritance readout from after Chuck's death, where Howard is dealing with his estate, and he's giving Rebecca. Basically, Chuck gave Rebecca almost everything. Rebecca's his ex-wife, and it's interesting because Kim asked Jimmy at first that, are you going to go? He's like, nah, I'm not going to bother. I don't care. And again, it seems like I'm not sure if Jimmy actually has moved on, from Chuck's death, or if he's just, I think he's just blocking everything out, and he's just distracting himself and not dealing. It almost seems like to me, like some kind of explosion is pending, like it's coming, because he's bottling up all of the sadness, the anger, and all of the feelings that he has about his brother's death. His brother, who did very much, as I covered in all my reviews, treated him like shit, especially in recent years. And so I'm sure but he still loved him as his brother, so he'd have mixed feelings. It seems like he's bottling all that up. Now, I said in my review of last episode that it seems like Howard's revelation was a way of Jimmy to because at the start of that episode you did see him really upset, but then he was like all happy, oh, look at the fish go and stuff after Howard made that revelation. So I think that was a way for him to say, oh, it's not, I don't have to worry about it, it's not my fault, it was all Howard's doing. So I'm not sure, maybe there won't be an explosion, maybe he has really moved beyond it and just doesn't care anymore. I'm not sure, to be honest. I'll be curious to see where they take it. But it's interesting that it seems like Kim, at least outwardly anyway, is more affected by Chuck's death than Jimmy is. I think Jimmy might be more affected inwardly, but he's not showing it at all, where Kim is flat out, like, she's basically yelling at Howard on Jimmy's behalf. Like, she shows up to the meeting on Jimmy's behalf and sees that, like, that Chuck is giving Rebecca everything. As soon as Rebecca leaves, she's polite when she's there. As soon as she leaves, it's like, oh, so you're just gonna pay him out. And she guessed the amount of money that Howard was gonna give him from Chuck's estate, and it was the amount of money. Yeah, she puts it as the amount of money to keep him quiet, to not contest anything, but just enough, And, and Howard's like, look, what can I do? And then it also gives him a letter from Chuck that was meant to Jimmy. And it's interesting because Kim describes it, it's just another berating, his berating from the grave. It's just the last thing Jimmy wants. And you see her when she gets home, she has the letter and she's thinking about giving it to Jimmy, but she doesn't, because she can tell that Jimmy doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't want anything to do with it. He just wants to be distracted and watch TV, and she doesn't want to disturb that. Doesn't want to crack, make him, upset him or anything. So it's interesting is that I always hate it when this happens though in TV as a trope, when there's a letter or something that's meant for another person, that person hides it or doesn't. Oh, it's going to upset them. So that's a trope that always annoys me. It's going to come up eventually. It's just give them the fucking letter. But anyway, but getting back to Kim and Howard, it's interesting because Kim goes off on him for unburdening himself, and he's saying he was making, it was all about him releasing his guilt, making him feel better, and putting it on Jimmy. And again, I'm not sure if I agree with that assessment, because it seemed to me that Jimmy almost did feel better by the fact that Howard was taking responsibility for Chuck's death, because it seems like he was taking responsibility off of his hands, so he no longer had to carry that burning. So I'm not sure if I really agree with Kim here. Maybe, I don't know, I could be wrong. Maybe she's right. But it does seem to me like she's taking Chuck's death harder than Jimmy is. As I said, at least outwardly, maybe Jimmy's hiding things, but she's definitely, I don't know, she's speaking on Jimmy's behalf, things that I don't think, like, she was talking about how they'll pass on taking, going to Chuck's house and taking all the things, keepsakes or whatever, because she thinks that would be too upsetting for Jimmy. I'm not sure. I'm sure if she asked Jimmy, he would probably say, no, I'll pass. But I think that's just because he's trying to ignore all this and brush it aside. So maybe she's right in that case. But in the case, and of course, the thing about being on this board for, whatever, to give grants for exceptional students or whatever, that's something that Chuck would never give to Jimmy in a million years. I think she's dead right on that he definitely wouldn't want to do that. But as far as, Jimmy being really upset at Howard for unburdening himself like that, that's where I kind of disagree. I'm not sure if Jimmy actually does feel that way. But maybe, I don't know, it's interesting. But it's also interesting Howard's response to this, because you can tell that he has no ill intentions. He's just like, okay, Kim, what can I do? What can I do to make this better? What can I do to make up for it? And she's just like, do nothing. There's nothing you can do. Just stop, coming to Jimmy. Stop seeing him. Just don't have any contact with him. Which I have a feeling, since he's still a main character on the show, that's not going to happen because we still need to see Howard in the show. It's just a matter of judging it from a TV show. But I don't know. It's just interesting to see where that will go from there. But anyway, getting back to Jimmy, after all this happens, he doesn't care about any of this. We see him looking up on the internet because there's this figurine that reminded him of the figurines we've seen from his elderly clients from the earlier season, and he saw it with the people he had the job interview with, the idiots as he calls them, and that one guy, I think it was the head boss, came in and he's like, oh, this is a lot of crap, we need to get rid of it, we should just throw it all in the garbage anyway. And he looks it up online and sees it's worth it's I can't remember how much it was, but it was a lot of money. And then he calls Mike and says, I have a job for you. You're going to really like this. I'm not sure what the hell is going on. I mean, is it as simple as stealing it or conning them out of it? It doesn't seem like you need Mike for that. I don't know. It seems like it's a bit... there's more to it than that. And why would Mike like this job? And it's curious to see if Mike will take the job, because we know that Mike doesn't need the money anymore because he has all that money from the stolen truck, whatever that he's getting paid, laundered, whatever. But anyway, moving on to that, let's talk about Mike. So, I had a couple commenters in my last review point out that one thing I got wrong is that this Gus isn't paying him. It was actually Mike's own money. It's been a while since I've seen season 3. Sorry, I forgot that it was his own money that he stole from the truck that Gus is laundering for him. And also, another commenter suggested that one of the reasons Mike is doing this, because I was a bit confused on why he was doing it, is because there would be evidence, to be proof that he works for Magical, so it's not just a paper trail, so if anyone comes looking, they could say, no, he actually was there. And that is confirmed because that's exactly what Mike says to Lydia, because Lydia calls him up and is pretty much not happy about him busting into the factory and messing things up, and she's just like, what if I asked you to reconsider? He's just like, well, I'd ask you to do the same. And it's funny because she's like, she thinks he's putting himself more at risk by showing his face, and he's like, no, I disagree, because I'm making a legitimate saying that I do work for this company. And I think Mike's right. It seems like Lydia just doesn't like him or has a bug up her ass about him, which kind of makes sense, seeing what the relationship was like in Breaking Bad, that the two of them really didn't like each other. In fact, both tried to kill each other a couple of times. So this does make sense. And she warns Mike, though, that not to get on Gus's bad side, but when she calls Gus, he doesn't seem to care. He's just like, leave me alone. I don't really care about this, because he's all concerned about Hector, which I'll get to shortly. But, Lydia's just like, if we don't do anything about it, he's just going to keep showing up at random to our places and stealing people's badges. And he's just like, well, give him a badge then, and then hangs up. So I think, and he also speaks highly of Mike, so I think he recognizes, he sees something in Mike, and I don't know. I don't know if he's thinking yet of using him for his purposes, or if at the moment he just respects him and is just like, let him do his thing, which I think is, at the moment, is the case. But we do know that the two of them will become more involved, which I hope we get more of this season. But I think this is a great start to it. Very interesting. But anyway, speaking of Gus, let's move over to Gus now. So this is very interesting because we see Hector in the hospital and his fate is uncertain. Of course, we know from Breaking Bad what's going to happen to him. He's going to become paralyzed and a wheelchair, and the only way he can communicate is by pushing a bell. But at this stage, they're not even sure if he'll ever wake up from the coma, if he will be brain dead permanently, if he'll ever be able to communicate or anything like that. And Gus is like, that's unacceptable. I want him to live. I want him to be aware, to suffer. And it's interesting because it shows that we see that that one guy who was the doctor we saw that worked for Gus in Breaking Bad, which I didn't recognize him at first. I was like, God, that guy looks so familiar. But then once they started talking medical stuff with Gus, I was like, oh yes, that's the doctor guy that works for Gus. And it's interesting. And so he was trying to, tell Gus like what would be the best way. He's like, there's nothing really you can do short of like maybe some doctors at Johns Hopkins would be able to help him, but other than that, I wouldn't see. So the next thing you see, a doctor from Johns Hopkins just happens to show up due to a generous grant. So it's obvious that Gus was paying for these really, professional doctors. And it's interesting seeing the contrast between this, really professional doctor from Johns Hopkins and the doctor at the other hospital, and how professional she is. She's like, oh, he was receiving great care at this hospital, but now I'm going to do everything I can. And the other guy is obviously scared of, he had Tuco's cousins, of course, were very well known from Breaking Bad, and they're very scary dudes, and the doctor there was just like scared of them. But this other professional doctor from Johns Hopkins comes in and immediately just starts speaking Spanish to them and connecting to them. It's like, don't worry, this is what you need to do, I'll have it all. And she's not intimidated by them at all. And it shows what is so much. It was a great scene. I like it. It showed the contrast between the, and how she never badmouthed the hospital at all, but saying that she's gonna work, and she seemed to know more of what was going on and what would be the best thing to do. But of course, we saw that by the end of this episode, there's still no progress with Hector, and Gus isn't happy about that. But I don't know. So we know the end game, but it'd be interesting to see how we get there. So now, getting into Nacho. This is interesting because we get the scene with his dad, and his dad's not talking to him, of course, because his dad's still really pissed off that he brought the gangsters into his business. But Nacho is like reassuring him, trying to talk to him, being like, don't worry, they're gone, I took care of it, they won't bother you anymore, you don't need to give them money anymore. But he sets up the money, he leaves it there, and Nacho's like, don't worry, no one's coming from it, but he refuses to take it, so then Nacho eventually takes the money. Now, my interpretation of this scene, and I've heard different other interpretations, so maybe I'm wrong, but my interpretation was that money was the money set aside for, the laundering or whatever, so it's not his money. So I think Nacho's father doesn't want to take it because it's not his money. It's not honest money. He doesn't want the dirty gangster money. And he's like, get rid of it. And so the reason Nacho takes it is because he realizes that his father doesn't want the dirty money, and so he takes it to get rid of it. I've heard other interpretations that Nacho was like, he wants the money, he likes the power, he wants the money for himself. I don't know if I agree with that. I think that was more of the father not wanting the dirty money anywhere near him, and Nacho realized that, so it obliged him and took it away from him. But then his father asks, like right when he's leaving, okay, so the gangsters are gone, and they won't bother me anymore, but what about you? And he's just like, I'm working on it. So you can tell he doesn't really, this whole experience shook him up, and he didn't really care for it anymore. But anyway, we see him go out, and he's dealing with business as usual, taking over Salamanca's territories. We have that other, one of Hector's goons, I can't recall his name, but we've seen him around. He's been around for a while. He's now the one taking over, and they go to a meeting with Gus's men, and they're like, oh, we have to have 6. They're going to try to give us 5, but insist on 6. And so he was insisting on 6, and Gus's men were just like, no, fuck you, or 5 is what we agreed on. Nacho pulls his gun, and so they find, all right, we'll give you 6. And it's funny as they're walking out, like, that Tuco's goon or whatever, the guys in charge was like, see, they were shitting their pants. But of course, I knew that was not true. These are Gus's men, they're hard as fuck. I knew they weren't shitting their pants. And of course, Gus just comes out of nowhere and puts a bag over that dude's head and strangles him to death. Basically ties it around his head so he can't. And the episode's called Breathe, and it ends with him breathing his last breath. And of course, he goes to Nacho and says, look, he flat out says, I know what you did. The Salamancas don't know what you did, but I do, so that means you're mine. That Gus is such a great character. He was a beloved villain, really good reasons, and I think we're seeing the best of him again. It is really great. And so it's interesting because through this journey of the show with Nacho's journey, as I said, covered in season 3, you do relate a lot to this character and feel for him, that he's just trying to do what's best for his family, and now he kind of wants to get out of it. But now we see that's not going to be the case. He's not necessarily going to be able to get out of it because now Gus owns him, as he says. So basically, I think what I take from this is that Gus wants him to continue to work for the Salamancas. In fact, he killed off that other guy, so Nacho would be even higher on the totem pole, which is my interpretation of that. So Nacho will have more power, more responsibility, but ultimately be under Gus's control. So Gus can have a man in the Salamancas organization, so he can manipulate things from both sides because he has something over Nacho, so basically, as he says, owns him. That was what I got from that scene. Really great scene. Really loved it. Overall, as I said, great episode. So my rating for Breathe out of 10 is a 9. Excellent. As I said, like, really great acting, really great story structure, a lot of great character moments, never a dull moment. Yes, high quality television, what you expect from Better Call Saul. Anyway, that is it for my review of Breathe. I will be back, of course, every week reviewing every episode of Better Call Saul, so be sure to check that out, and also check out my channel for many other videos and many other shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek The Expanse, Babylon 5, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.